The phone call came exactly 31 days after the will was read. It was my mother. Her voice had that breezy, entitled quality it always gets when she needs something, as if she's ordering a subordinate to handle a minor inconvenience. "Hi, honey," she chirped. "The lights are out. The whole house is dark. And we don't have any water." And Claire's car insurance sent her a cancellation notice. What is going on? Did you forget to pay the bills? I let the silence stretch for a moment, savoring it. I leaned back in the chair in my new office, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and I pictured her standing in the kitchen of the big, empty house she could no longer afford. Then I uttered those 4 words. The first and final step in a revenge that was born a month ago in a stuffy lawyer's office. They thought the will was the end of the story. They had no idea it was the beginning of my independence and the end of their free ride. I'm glad to have you here, guys. If you're new here, kindly subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to support more stories like this one. I promise you, this story is worth every minute of your time. Alright, let's get into it, because this needs to be told. This isn't about a lopsided will. That was just the final insult. This is about a decade of being treated like a human utility, 5 years of being the unpaid, unappreciated manager of a sinking ship, and the final, glorious, and meticulously executed severing of the parasitic cord. My name is Alex. I'm 38, and I am the less serious son. My father, Robert, was a brilliant immunologist, a man who spent his life in a lab, mapping the intricate defenses of the human body. He was also a shrewd investor, quietly building a substantial nest egg over 40 years of diligent work. My mother, Margaret, was his lifelong partner, a woman whose main skill was enjoying the fruits of his labor while maintaining an air of long-suffering martyrdom. And then there's my sister, Claire. Claire is 42, and she is a professional victim. She has a master's degree in art history that she used for exactly 6 months before deciding the professional world was too toxic for her sensitive soul. Her life has been a series of self-created dramas that always required a financial bailout from our father. There was the artisanal soap business that ended with 1,000 bars of unsellable lavender-scented concrete in her garage and a $30,000 credit card bill. There was the spiritual journey to an ashram in India that somehow required a business-class flight in a 5-star hotel. There was the series of disastrous relationships with unemployed artists and musicians who all seemed to need a security deposit for a new apartment right before they disappeared. And through it all, our mother was her enabler and chief cheerleader. Claire wasn't irresponsible. She was a creative. She wasn't a grifter. She was finding herself. She was, in my mother's words, the serious one, because her life was just so full of feeling and drama. I, on the other hand, was the boring one, the reliable one. I didn't go into medicine. I went into numbers. I became a forensic accountant. My job is to find the hidden money, to follow the paper trail, to make sense of financial chaos. I don't create drama. I solve it. I didn't ask for bailouts. I built my own small firm from the ground up. I was the one who came over on weekends to fix my parents' leaky faucet, to do their taxes, to explain their investment statements. I was their utility, useful, but utterly unexciting. 5 years ago, my father was diagnosed with a degenerative neurological disease. It was slow, and it was cruel. It took his brilliant mind, piece by piece, leaving behind a confused, frightened man. And that's when my role in the family solidified. I became the primary caregiver. Claire was, of course, too emotionally fragile to handle the day-to-day realities of his decline. My mother was too overwhelmed, so I stepped in. I moved my office to my home so I could be there. I managed his medications. I hired and supervised a team of nurses. I dealt with the doctors, the insurance companies, the endless, soul-crushing bureaucracy of a long-term illness. And, most importantly, I took over the family finances. My father, in one of his last lucid moments, had given me a durable power of attorney. He knew what was coming, and he trusted me, his boring, reliable son, to keep the ship afloat. For 5 years, I paid every single bill. The mortgage, the property taxes, The car payments, the insurance, the groceries, the army of medical professionals. I did it all from a central operating account that I funded with my own money, meticulously tracking every penny, intending to be reimbursed from the estate after he passed. It was a massive financial and emotional drain, but I did it because I loved my father. I did it while my mother and sister continued their weekly spa days and shopping trips, their lives utterly undisrupted by the slow tragedy unfolding in the next room. They saw the lights stay on and the fridge stay full, and they simply assumed it was happening by magic. My father passed away 2 months ago. The day of the will reading, we all sat in a stuffy lawyer's office. I was exhausted, still numb with grief, but I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. I had honored my father. I had done my duty. The lawyer, a man I didn't recognize, cleared his throat and read the will. It was a new will, drafted only a year ago. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I knew my father hadn't been legally competent to draft a new will in the last year. The will was simple. The house, the stocks, the savings. A liquid estate of just under $1 million after all debts were settled. To my daughter Claire, in recognition of her deep emotional support and understanding during my final years, I leave the sum of $950,000. The lawyer droned on, but the words turned to static in my ears. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mother and sister were looking at their hands, a picture of false humility. Finally, he got to me. And to my son, Alex, for his assistance, I leave the sum of $15,000. $15,000. I had spent over $200,000 of my own money over the last 5 years, keeping their lives afloat. I had sacrificed my time, my business's growth, my own emotional well-being, and I was being left with less than 10% of what I had personally paid out. I looked at my mother, searching for some sign of outrage, of confusion. She just shrugged, a small, dismissive gesture. "Well," she said, her voice betraying no emotion at all. "She's the more serious one, Alex. Her life is more complicated." I didn't say a word. I didn't yell. I didn't protest. I saw the whole picture with the ice-cold precision of a forensic accountant. The new lawyer. The timing of the will. My mother had taken my confused, dying father and had him sign a new will, cutting me out and rewarding the daughter who had done nothing. It wasn't an oversight. It was a coup, and in that moment, as I looked at their smug, self-satisfied faces, my grief for my father was overshadowed by a cold, calculating rage. The revenge wasn't a plan. It was a decision, made in a single, silent, furious instant. They thought they had won. They thought they had secured their financial future, but they had made one catastrophic mistake. They had forgotten who had been paying the bills, and they had no idea that I, the man they had just discarded, still held all the account numbers, all the passwords, and all the power. Their story was over. Mine was just beginning. I walked out of that lawyer's office a different man. The part of me that felt a sense of familial duty had been surgically removed and replaced with a block of ice. I didn't contest the will. That was the first, most crucial part of my decision. Contesting it would have been messy, emotional, and exactly what they expected. It would have put me in the position of a jilted son, begging for his share. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to let them drown in the very prize they had stolen. I went home, opened my laptop, and began the quiet, systematic process of untangling myself from their finances. For the past 5 years, every single one of their household bills was on an automatic payment schedule, linked directly to the operating account that I funded. And with a series of cold, satisfying clicks, I began to turn off the taps. I didn't just stop the payments. I logged into each utility provider's website. I went into the settings, and I changed the contact information for all notifications. The billing address, the email address, the phone number, from my information to my sister Claire's. All those friendly, "your bill is now available," emails, and "your payment is due soon," texts would now be going directly to the new millionaire heiress. The final, most beautiful step was the mortgage. I canceled the automatic payment. For the next 30 days, I was a ghost. My mother and Claire were undoubtedly celebrating their victory. They were rich. They had their money. The practical son was out of the picture. They lived in their comfortable house, blissfully unaware that the foundation was crumbling beneath them. They didn't notice that the bills weren't being paid because they had never, not once in their lives, actually looked at a utility bill. That was a job for the help. And I had been fired. The phone call came exactly 31 days after the will was read. It was my mother. Her voice had that breezy, entitled quality it always gets when she needs something. "Hi, Alex," she said, her voice tight. "The lights are out." "Really?" I said, feigning mild surprise. "Did you check the breaker box?" "Of course I checked the breaker box. The whole house is dark. And we don't have any water." And Claire's car insurance sent her a cancellation notice. What is going on? I let her panic build for a moment before I replied. "It sounds like you haven't paid your bills." The silence on the other end was profound. "What are you talking about?" she finally sputtered. "You pay the bills. You've always paid the bills." "No, Mother," I corrected her. "I was paying the bills as a service to my father. But as you in the will made perfectly clear, my services are no longer required. You and my sister now have $950,000 sitting in a bank account. You have more than enough money to pay your own bills. I suggest you learn how." But I don't know how," she wailed, the full, terrifying reality of her situation finally dawning on her. "I don't have the account numbers. I don't know the passwords." "That does sound like a problem," I said, my voice betraying no sympathy. "But as you said, Claire is the serious one. I'm sure someone with her deep emotional understanding can figure out how to call the power company. That's what serious people do. They handle their own responsibilities." The silence on my end was peaceful. I imagine the silence on her end was the sound of a world ending. The aftermath was not a dramatic explosion, but a slow, agonizing collapse, which I pieced together from a series of increasingly frantic voicemails and one final, glorious conversation. Then came Claire's messages, dripping with her signature brand of condescending manipulation. "Alex, I know you're upset about the will, but this is incredibly childish. Mom is very distressed. You need to call the utility companies and fix this. It's the least you can do." They still didn't get it. They thought it was a switch I could flip, a tantrum I would eventually get over. The real panic began when the bank started calling about the mortgage. That's when they realized this wasn't about a missed power bill. This was systemic. I imagined the scene in that house. Two completely helpless women, sitting in the dark with no running water and a pile of red-stamped final notices, suddenly realizing they had no idea how to function in the real world. They had the winning lottery ticket, the $950,000, but they couldn't cash it. Not yet. The estate had to go through probate, a process that takes months. The money was a number in a lawyer's letter, not cash in their account. The bills, however, were very real, and they were due now. The final call came about a week later, from Claire. She had clearly been crying. Her voice had lost its arrogance, replaced by a thin, desperate whine. "We went to the bank," she said without any preamble. "We tried to get a line of credit against the estate to pay the bills. They said our credit scores are too low." I almost laughed. Of course they were. They had no credit history. Dad had paid for everything. I had paid for everything. In the eyes of the financial world, they were ghosts. "That's a shame," I said, my voice neutral. "And the lawyer," she continued, her voice cracking, "the one who did the will. He said you haven't done anything illegal. He said you have no obligation to us. He said we have to. Figure it out." "That sounds like excellent legal advice," I replied. "You should probably listen to him." There was a long pause. I could hear my mother whispering frantically in the background. "What do you want, Alex?" Claire finally asked, the question heavy with a resignation that was more satisfying than any apology. "Do you want us to beg? Do you want us to renegotiate the will? What will it take to make you fix this?" And there it was. The transactional worldview of the parasite. They thought this was a negotiation. They thought my love, my respect, my 5 years of sacrifice could be bought back. They thought I wanted a bigger piece of the pie. They still didn't understand that I was done with their pie forever. "I don't want anything from you," I said, and the honesty of it felt like a clean, cool breeze. "I don't want your money. I don't want your apologies. I want nothing. That's the point. You see, for my entire life, you two have seen me as a function. The one who fixes things, the one who pays for things, the one who handles things. You never saw me. You just saw a resource. And you were right. I was a resource. And now, that resource has been shut down. Permanently. So you're just going to let us lose the house?" she whispered, the horror in her voice, as palpable as the silence in her dark home. "The house isn't my problem anymore," I said. "Neither is the power, the water, the insurance, or the country club membership that's about to be revoked for non-payment. Those are all your problems now. You're the serious one, Claire. You're the one with the deep emotional understanding. I'm sure you can apply that seriousness to figuring out how to get a cashier's check to the mortgage company before they initiate foreclosure proceedings." I let that hang in the air for a second before delivering the final quiet blow. "I have to go. I have a meeting with a new client. A very wealthy family, whose children are trying to defraud their aging father by manipulating his will. It's a fascinating case. I'm finding I have a real passion for that kind of work lately. Goodbye, Claire." I hung up the phone. I knew they wouldn't lose the house. Eventually, probate would clear. They would get their money, but they would step into their inheritance as different people. People with ruined credit, with a newfound and deeply unwanted understanding of late fees and reconnection charges. Claire, the creative, would now be the full-time bookkeeper for their dysfunctional little corporation. She had gotten everything she ever wanted, and it was going to be hell. And me? Well, you already know how my story ended.